Welcome to Audiation in the Wild with your hosts, Beau Taillefer and Eric Rasmussen. Season 4, Episode 4, Harmonic Learning Sequence, version 2.0. What do you say, Beau? Get this party started.
Let's do it. Let's talk about what we were born to talk about.
Born to run our mouths. Let's get this party started. See how many song titles we can get into this episode.
Sounds great.
So I've been playing around, Beau, with my harmonic learning sequence. Of course, it changes all the time, but I've gotten to the point where it's getting into a new sequence in terms of my primary objective is getting kids ready to improvise. Mm-hmm. Compose and improvise, or create and improvise. I just want them to be creative, and then they can compose if they can be creative twice in a row with the same stuff, right? It's like when I give kids an exercise to go home and play a melody. I don't care if it's 3 notes, but their job is to play it twice the same way. And that's my entrance into creativity. But to give kids the readiness for creativity, what do they need? You need your listening vocabulary. You need to go through Babel. You got to go through the point where you start early tonal and rhythm vocabulary training. But prior to that, harmonic learning sequence where kids can name tonic and dominant, subdominant, and double dominant functions before they're 4 or 5, many of them. There's some that don't learn that very well. So there's a nature-nurture thing going on there that we don't understand. But at any rate, there's definitely an aptitude for harmony that can be measured early, but take all that and move it into formal instruction. And we're ready for the kids to sing tonal patterns in tune. They're doing rhythm patterns in various meters. They're able to identify and recognize, not in that order, they recognize and then identify harmonic patterns. Harmonic patterns are part of harmonic progressions. Harmonic progressions are tied explicitly to the temporal element in songs. Mm-hmm. So Mary Had a Little Lamb isn't just tonic, dominant, tonic. That's the pattern. But it's tonic, 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 dominant, tonic, or do, 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 so, do, if you're not talking about the functions yet, just the roots. And before you talk about those syllables, bum, 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 bum. And I teach my kids to recognize that I call it a pattern to them, but it's a progression. Maybe I should tell them it's a progression and not a pattern. But I say, do you they get to the point where they recognize that, and then they say, oh yeah, that goes to, and I play all the songs that progression can go to. So anyway, I'm just distinguishing a harmonic pattern is just tonic, dominant, tonic. It doesn't have to have the temporal element. It can be a progression because tonic, dominant, tonic is the first, right? You do that twice in a row and you've got the first half of Hot Cross Buns.
Yeah, and I want to come back to this at some point in the episode because the distinction between those two ends up being really important for musicians of all levels.
Yeah. So I'm teaching, this is still harmonic learning sequence 1.0, but I've gotten to the point where we're needing more skill beyond the recognition, identification, and simple performance of tonal patterns and root melodies. And a simple addition to this, leading towards improvisation, is the most simple is taking the root melody, bum 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 bum. That's how they learn it. I don't like bum bum bum, although you could do that, but I think it's easier for kids to be audiating the macro beats along with the harmonic progression. Is that they now can change the root melody by adding rhythms to it. Ba-doop, ba-doop, doop, dee, dee, be, doop, bum, ba, 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 bum, however they want. And it's easy to do that on an instrument like the xylophone, or of course, vocally.
Yeah, I really think that's a good practical step that a lot of people skip. Yeah, a lot of people skip improvising on the bass line.
It's a good one. It's an easy one. And so they're singing tonal patterns, tonic and dominant, and then, of course, major and minor. And you do root melodies, and you add that element of creativity or rhythmic improvisation, if you will, to that. And then what? Right? They sing the melody. They perform the root melodies, because that's easier to perform than the melody in many cases. Then what do we want to do after that? And I'm convinced that tonal patterns over the course of a progression, like do mi so mi so fa re ti do mi do, or do mi fa re mi do, or whatever. It can be simple and stupid, but it gets them started where they're able to now perform simple patterns that go in time. Now, this will rub people the wrong way, because you're supposed to do tonal patterns without rhythm and rhythm patterns without tones, right? But we're beyond that, folks. We're already done. We did tonal patterns. They're doing great. They did rhythm patterns. They're doing great. Now, is there anything wrong with performing melodies? No. So we're just giving them like the stupidest simple melodies to just echo perform. Just, right? Just sing them back. Just echo perform these patterns, and now adapt that to an instrument, which I always think is one extra step of consolidating what they audiate onto something beyond their voice. And then what? Well, there's lick learning, which we've talked about, right? So you can improvise on the root melody by just changing the rhythms. But you can also improvise on the root melody by adding tones to it. Maybe they're just function tones, right? Or maybe you come up with an actual bass line. But is that more difficult or less difficult than improvising over a melody? Or is it the same? And where does that cross? If you can we change the melody a little bit by adding some extra notes?
Well, and I think one problem people might have with this, that's good to mention right off the bat, is that these levels of difficulty, going from singing root melodies / which I would think of the root melody just as the most basic bass line that's possible. And then you add cool rhythms to it. And like something that I'll often do as students is we start with a 1-6-2-5. Do, la, re, so, bum, ba, and then we do the rhythm thing. Ba da da da, da 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 da, ba da da da, ba da 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 da, ba da ba da, boom boom bum bum, ba da 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 da. And I'll have them imitate. So I started with vanilla bass, then with rhythmic addition. Then I started doing things, and we don't really need to label it theoretically.
Well, neighbor tones.
I started I started approaching things by a half step below or a half step above. But for some people, that's going to sound very theoretical. But I mean, I would just play that for students and have them echo it and get that vocabulary of what does it sound like when I come into la from below,
or a whole step. Yeah, you did it.
And yeah, and you don't give them the theoretical rationale for that. You just have them
you just
sound.
adding extra tones.
But that's a good progression. And what I meant to say is that's where I'll start with a lot of people, especially in my context. It's like teenagers playing jazz guitar.
Yeah.
But that process of, first we're singing very fundamental root melodies / bass lines. Maybe next week it's rhythmic addition. Next week it's learning to add other tones. And then we're singing, I want to get into the tonal patterns over progressions. But
yes,
that might be something, that's not something you do like your first 2 weeks of starting, learning harmony or jazz or whatever you're doing. And then you're done with that. That's something you repeat over many different tunes you do. So when you get into a tune that's very complex and has new harmony, that's where you start. If you can't sing the bass line with cool rhythms, you're not ready for adding crazy tones to stuff.
Yeah, I went through the sequence, but I didn't talk about the content.
Exactly.
I did talk about major and minor, but I didn't talk about that you got to do, 3 or 4 or 5 tunes at least in major and 3 or 4 or 5 tunes at least in minor. It should be easy to incorporate new tunes that have exactly the same progression.
Oh, for sure.
But it should change your improvisation, because when you improvise, you want to know where you are in the melody of that song, not just the roots and not just the functions. Mm-hmm. So that you can dance around the melody. It shows the audience, hey, I'm right there. It's a way to connect with the audience. I heard this great trumpet solo yesterday by this young girl. My gosh, these kids in Portugal are just killing me. And she was playing Someday My Prince Will Come, which is not the easiest of tunes.
Sure.
And she's a 10-year-old, and she's just playing just the sweetest lines through the changes, and it's nothing complex about it at all. She's not playing out. There's no mistake anywhere where you go, oh, she did something that's a little weird and she fixed it like you can do in jazz, whatever. No, it was just beautiful. She sings beautifully. So she sang the tune and she improvises it. It's just so natural, and they're so young. I don't know what they're doing. I'm trying to get a hold of the guy that's leading these kids, these high schools that sound like some of the better big band performances I've heard. Mm-hmm. With the kids improvising. And it's just so sweet. She just quotes the melody a little, like letting you know she's right there. Mm-hmm. And it's such it could be a way for her to like anchor herself, but it also like gives the audience like, a connection. If you're not audio, how many jazz performers play and it's devoid of the melody that they're playing over. Mm-hmm. And you can do that and play changes and make your own melodies that are just as captivating as the original melody. But it's one thing to add embellishments to a melody and then to improvise and quote the melody. So you're like anchoring the audience's audiation into like, hey, here's where we are in case you forgot. And it's something sweet about that I enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a good access point for people to learn how to improvise, because if you learn how to throw a little embellishment on a couple of the melody notes, I mean, that can be done using audiation and not.
So there's another step. Just play the melody, but just like you did the bass line, you added some tones to it, and then approach some of the non-function tones from, a little bit below, a little bit above, or whatever. That you can do that with the melody as well. Mm-hmm. And it's not that hard. I'm getting tremendous success with it right off the bat when I have kids do this. But what I haven't done consistently is give them lick patterns over top. Right now I'm having it because they're first grade, second grade. And they can make up a little bit here and there. It's easy for them to do the root melodies because that's just so. By easy, I mean every time they do something wrong, they recognize it and they try to fix it because we're doing it on xylophones. Because it hammers like, I'm going for, the other thing about putting on a xylophone, it hammers for them, I'm going for this tone, and do I like that tone right now or not? It's not your voice. It's a different choice you're making with your voice than it is when you go for something that's physical in front of you.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense.
So it gives kids an opportunity to play something and they're like, no, I don't like that. Whereas if you sing, they're still kind of squirrely about their choices.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're solidifying their choices by you got to hit this tone or that tone, or, you know, you got to stick within. And there's nothing wrong with playing wrong tones if that's what your audiation is.
Yeah.
You know, quote unquote wrong tones. But you can tell when their faces scrunch up. That you don't have to teach them. They fix themselves, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And if you're coming to the xylophone or piano or guitar, whatever, as someone that's audiating, you interact with those instruments more like the voice than just something you're pushing buttons on.
Oh, for sure. You know? No, because they audiate, like I said, the tonal patterns. So the tonality, the progression, right? Mm-hmm. The tonal patterns, the roots with the extra rhythms. Now the melody, and add extra notes to the melody.
Mm-hmm. So there's another thing that I want to get into, and I do want to talk about licks because licks are super important. But we have this distinction between learning new functions, and that may be attached to a pattern like 151 or whatever 141. But then we have progressions, and what I think is really interesting is if you look at great jazz educators, whether it's like Barry Harris, Burt Ligon, this Chad Lefkowitz Brown guy, Chad LB, who's an amazing sax player that you guys should check out. He's an amazing jazz educator. They all do this thing where they take a tune and they play the whole thing in MLT language as tonal patterns. And they play the same exercise. So it ends up being like a familiar pattern in a familiar order. And they play these tunes with all, in jazz, it's usually seventh chords. So like major sevens, minor sevens, dominant sevens. But you could just do it with triads. You could just do it with regular functions. And they learn this tune. And pretty much all the good educators recommend doing this and recommend learning to sing it away from your instrument. And what this is really like, this is like learning a set of tonal patterns. And now we're starting to kind of even get closer to the lick like lens, but it's like having a set of tonal patterns that works over an entire song. And it's crazy how powerful this is for your ears. But the reason this is really important to do is because let's say, for example, you can audiate 251 and 25 of whatever, and maybe like a tritone sub, or it doesn't even matter. You can audiate some jazz progressions. That doesn't necessarily mean you can audiate it in the context you can audiate jazz patterns. Let's use that more technically. You can audiate 251, whatever. But in the context of an actual progression and harmonic form, it doesn't mean you can audiate that song and improvise over it, because you need to know where the changes are. Maybe this first 251, the 2 is a whole bar, the 5 is a whole bar, and then all of a sudden it's compressed.
But that's where the tonal patterns over top of the changes help. Right?
That's where that
and
really
then
helps.
I forgot to tell you one other thing. It's like for Mary Had a Little Lamb, I don't go 1 1 1 1 5 1 for the first improvisation. I just do 5 1 then da. Play whatever you want, but we're gonna go bam bam. So you go ba da ba da ba, right? Ba da ba da bum, right? Ba-da-dee-dum-da-dee-dum. Right? They could just, Just play anything. Make mistakes right now. I want you to make mistakes and find stuff that you like, what is cool, what you don't like. Because whatever you play, I'd have nothing to say about it if you like it. And I can tell that you're audiating and playing 5-1. So I just get them to, not the beginning, the ending. And then what you have before that is just tonic. So now, here's where you change to dominant. They already feel that. By the way, all of this is included with movement, so that, you know, 1, 1, 1, 1. Change your weight somewhere. You know, move your body so that you feel and are preparing for the dominant before it happens. So that I don't want to exclude movement. I think I inadvertently exclude talking about how important movement is in all of this. If you insert the movement over top of everything I taught at the other levels, even tonal patterns, if there's some kind of movement, it's not bad at all. In fact, sure. I think Gordon even says move to tonal patterns. And with rhythm patterns, it's not as emphasized. It's the breathing that's emphasized with rhythm. And the movement with the tonal, which I found bizarre. I thought it would be the opposite. And I don't know if it's changed, but when I first heard that, I was like, that's weird. I thought you would breathe for tones and move for rhythm. But it was the opposite. He was suggesting breathe in time for the rhythm and move with the tones. Bum, bum, bum. I don't think there's any right way or wrong way with regard to that. I just think movement is underemphasized with everything we do. Because if you just get your body moving, it doesn't even have to be in time. It nothing rhythmic. Just, you know, that your body is in motion while you're learning. That you're not sitting still, you know, at the desk and listening. No, move. Just whatever it is you're doing, you should be moving. Like for any kind of learning.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan. Yeah, I think it helps when we're talking about like feeling the weight of like 5-1 or like 5-5 to 5. The movement helps pinpoint what it's supposed to feel like harmonically.
Yeah, you feel it in your body that it's going to change, and then you change on or before on purpose or after on purpose. The change happens, that the chord shifts to the next, you know, the next function.
So the thing I want to bring out though here is that really in terms of having patterns versus progressions, what I think there's often a gulf between people's improv ability, because what happens is they may be able to audiate like 1, 4, and 5, but that doesn't necessarily, like if you can audiate 1, 4, and 5 and identify it when someone plays on the piano and even sing some tonal patterns, that doesn't actually mean you can intelligently create melodies that weave through those changes. And the example I like to use that really highlights this point is ask a good jazz musician to solo over a 2-5-1 and then ask them to solo over a 1-5-2, and you will hear the difference in the quality of performance because they've trained soloing over 2-5-1. It's part of their vocabulary. They haven't trained it the other way, and so their vocabulary goes out the window.
It's a different progression, and that knowing the functions doesn't allow for that progression to be audiated the same way because you know the functions inside it.
In the same way, like linguistically, you can understand a bunch of nouns. Like, okay, here's a guitar, here's a room, here's a house, and you can understand a bunch of verbs, jumping, you know, rolling. And that doesn't necessarily give you the ability to combine them into a meaningful sentence. And so I think this is why in the jazz community specifically, one piece of advice that's often given for people learning how to improvise is to transcribe solos. And when I mean transcribe, I'm not essentially saying you're listening to a note and writing it down, listening to a note and writing it down. I mean, you're learning their solo, however that is. Someone can show it to you by rote. Yeah. You can listen to it. But I mean...
these things will apply into that jazz world, which is where You're going, I want to just simplify this process that can be, it's exactly the same process that you're using, except you've got more complex content in terms of the changes and the speed.
Yeah, but I think we're on the same page. Like we're just trying to highlight there's an audiation factory here essentially, and the content just gets pushed through the factory, and it pretty much doesn't matter tonally what you're working on. It's the same stuff.
It's the same sequence of skills, and the more melodies you know, that's like learning licks, right? And there's nothing wrong with learning melodies, right? It's what I keep saying. So there's nothing wrong with learning licks, because licks are just melodies that get you over and through progressions with meaning. And it's
especially when you can audiate harmonically, the licks are harmonically understood.
But that's the readiness. You don't do lick learning until you can do the roots, until you can add rhythm patterns to the roots, until you can embellish the melody, embellish the bass. We call it a bass line now, because that's where it's not a root melody anymore. It's a bass line, because the root melody is just the roots of the functions. So it has to all go in sequence, and then learn these licks over harmonic patterns.
Yep.
Just the basics, like 5-1, just do-ba-dee-da-dee-da,
What really impressed me the other day when I was watching a video of this Chad LB guy, the sax player, this jazz educator. He was like, "Yeah, you should transcribe, but you know what? A lot of people forget to do is learn the harmony of the song before they transcribe the solo." And I'm like, "This guy gets it.
Yeah,
this guy understands."
Yeah, you can't.
What audiation is,
because it changes the context.
How are you going to understand what this player is playing unless you understand the harmonic context they're coming in? Because even if they're breaking the rules, you can't tell if they're breaking the rules if you don't know what chord they're breaking or what they're. And that just impressed me a lot, because it's so rare you see that level of understanding. Even among great educators, the context window just gets thrown out, because they're often, these people are so good that is just something they don't consciously think of.
Yes.
But yeah. I mean,
if I can review, I got my keyboard here. It's like, hey, we're in C major. Listen, everybody. What is this function? And everybody will say tonic, right? Do, mi, do, and do, mi, so is tonic, and so, mi, do is tonic. But not when you've also, and I'm still in the same tonality and the same, and I'm still in the same tonality and the same keyality, but do, mi, so is no longer tonic function, because there's harmonic, right? You've got harmonic. Right, you've got.
What I sang, I sang do mi do la fi, da 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 da, which kind of reminds me of 5 of 5, or like 2 5 of 3.
But you've got to have tonal context, but tonality isn't sufficient. This is a review. Tonality is insufficient for tonal context. You also need harmonic context, because I can change. But this little light of mine. Let me do it here. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Now you can audiate that as like that's part of tonic and it's there too early. But so you've got a natural extra tone.
Yeah, that sounds like a 13th chord, like over the 5 on the 5 to me.
Yeah, whatever.
But yeah, it doesn't matter.
That you find these, you can find these extra tones that happen naturally in a melody. And use that as a jumping off point for, extra tones and chords. because the kids can easily understand that, oh, it's just added an extra tone. So, and one of the easiest ones is just add T to tonic and add mi to subdominant. That's the next one. Dominants are a little trickier because there's so much more things you can do to it at a basic level.
Oh, yeah.
At the flat 9, sharp 9, blah, 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 go on and on. But if you can,
I would say by adding me to the 4 chord or to the subdominant is a very easy on-ramp for people to audiate. It seems to be tolerated quite well.
Yeah.
I don't know why. That's just my observation with teaching people. Like if you try to add T onto the tonic chord, a lot of people are like, I don't know about that. And then you add me onto the subdominant, and they're like, yeah, that's cool. What is that?
Yeah, it may not be as harsh because T is part of dominant and mi is part of tonic, and dominant is the it's like the pole away. So in just like some world, this is like T's got that pole here, but mi is gentler as the same. It's the same exact. It's a different function, and it's the same exact notes, say.
Me can take a beating. I mean, put it over. Put B flat dominant or B flat 7 with me on top and C major. That's a nice sound. Or put Tay in the bass and just go. Boom, 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 boom.
So, adding extra tones to chords naturally is my leeway from these lick patterns becoming more jazzy as opposed to just improvising over tonic and dominant without the extra tones. And so I'm completely into giving my kids this oral experience or just listening vocabulary first. Can we just give them a lot? So two Saturdays ago, somebody in my class mentioned Neapolitan, but they were thinking of the ice cream. for their second grade. This girl's second grade. It's like Neapolitan. I said, you know what Neapolitan is? It's like Ray Ra Do. You guys already know, the flat 2. They already know that tritone substitution root movement. And so I said, that's just like, and I don't call it tritone substitution. I just call it Ray Ra Do. That's what we don't have a name for it yet. It's like Ray Ra Do, but instead of going Ray Ra Do, I could do like just listen, and I just have them listen to if it's and that's one they know. And they recognize that so easily. And I said, now I'm just going to make it minor, and I'm going to go Ra. It's like Ra Do, but except now it's but instead of going right to tonic, I'm going to go dominant tonic. So listen. And then I can, because some people out there are screaming at me, I go that. Ray, it's like Ray, mi, la, Ray, mi, la, Ray, mi, compare that to Re, Mi, La. So now they're starting to see, oh, that's kind of a more of a definitive bottom. Then that's dumb. This is not dumb. And it's the same thing that happens when I do Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Right? Out at the ball game, for it's 1, 2. Let me get myself oriented. La, little Ray, big Ray. So, and if you don't know what I just did, you got to take my harmonic learning sequence. Right? Right? So this chord, does this make sense? La, re, so, do, fa, mi, do. Because that next chord is a tonic, so play do in the root, right? And if you play that for a kid and ask him, do you like that or do you like this? And they'll say, well, just keep fa, fi, so, show me tonic, but you're going to sing so as the root. So that's my first inversion that they learn.
Yeah, that one's very common.
So, la, re, so, do. So when you do, that, don't use it here because that is this, but this, same chords. So is way more, palliative. Is that the right word?
More tasteful.
There's a reason why they used that, in first inversion.
Yeah.
All through those however many years that the Neapolitan was alive and well, and everybody used it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, those are all little bits of language, right? And I think part of the challenge is, when I'm talking or Eric's talking, especially about maybe some of these more advanced functions, and the jazz stuff gets ridiculous too. The language we use to describe these chords, like Neapolitan chords or like, a dominant chord off the flat 2, it sounds very theoretically dense, but I hope everyone is understanding that we're just using language to describe this, but you need to be doing this at the most extreme oral level imaginable. And when I'm practicing for myself, I do a lot of what Eric just did. I'll play 2 versions to myself, and I'm often recording them so I can listen back to it, because I don't want to be using any theoretical crutch. I want to be just listening to raw sounds. And better yet, if you have a friend who can just play the damn thing for you, so you don't have to be thinking theoretically at any point, that's the level you need to be working with this at. And licks go the same way. I mean, the reason I like teaching improv through licks, I'd rather teach a kid to use 20 or 30 licks and audiate them honestly, and they can spit them back and they start improvising on the lick rhythmically and even tonally. They add a couple notes to the lick, or they delete a couple notes to the lick through audiation, rather than here's some scales that work over these chords. Because honestly, Eric, if I could go back and teach my 15-year-old self who was learning jazz, it would have just been like, let's learn solos, let's learn licks, let's sing tonal patterns over progressions, and do some of these A and Bs. Here's 5-1, here's flat 2-1, Here's 4-5-1. Here's 4,
Yeah.
tritone subtone. Like that would be my education.
Yeah, and this sounds it sounds complicated what I'm doing with these first and second graders, that they're learning Neapolitan, right? Nobody's ever taught this in learning sequence. I don't think. It's not hard. It's just a matter, or tritone substitutions. It's the same. It's not hard. It's listening vocabulary. It's being able to A-B things that are similar and different at the same time, right? Or have just the right amount of, it's not that, and it's this. That's not this, it's that, it's what Gordon says, how do you learn major? Well, you learn minor so you can understand major. Major, and better than that is you learn major because it's not that, whatever that was. And that's not major. This is what? Major. What's this? Is this major or no? So then they can get experiences of things that are not major. And they don't have to call it minor. But then, of course, pretty soon they will. And then you can say it's not major, not minor. What is it? What resting tone? And I don't even get to major, minor. I do all these different resting tones all the time. Pick a resting tone. They pick, the other. So they've got the other T. Did we explain this in an episode? This is going to come out first. And the other, the kid said, well, there's another law. How about the other T? There's a law with only the, with the.
That's actually very common. It's a Locrian sharp 2. It's like a minor. Yeah, it's super common actually. Again, the content gets a bad rap because when I have to say what it is, it sounds nuts, but it's actually a very common sound. That's in film music everywhere.
This kid made it up though.
Yeah, I mean
theoretically. And I just played it. They weren't auditing something that made up. They're not that genius. Pretty high up there. But they're not crazy, Jacob Collier kind of, just insane amount of audiation going on there. The guy's got a universe of audiation versus anybody else's next thing is a galaxy.
Yeah,
I'm working on.
He's amazing.
I'm working on.
He's also
Venus.
A tip we can take from Jacob is to expand your vocabulary. I mean, if you watch interviews with him, he's always playing with new sounds. He's always playing with new chord progressions, new things. Like he's not really rehashing the same stuff.
Look up his YouTube video on Bridge Over Troubled Water. I forget who's singing. It's just like the progressions are like they're so sweet, and Lord knows I know what they are at all, but they are. He's got 100 choices every chord change. It seems like he's got 100 choices just for this chord change or this part of the melody. And oh my God, is it tasty? Sometimes it's a little much.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with Collier. A lot of people can't audiate well enough to listen to it, and then there's a taste thing. Some people, even if they can audiate it, it's too much. A good song to start people off with, if you want to show them how good Collier is, but you're worried about them reacting to, the pizzazz, is put Little Blue on, because Little Blue, it's so just in the pocket and straight up, and then all of a sudden there's such interesting, chord changes, but they're very subtle. They don't steal the show. Like the melody really stays manageable for most people.
Well, this Bridge Over Troubled Water, I got no problem with it. It's just I know that for some it's a lot, and it is a lot because you gotta be nimble. You gotta be relaxed and let him take you. Don't try to impose what you're thinking.
He honestly reminds me of Frank Zappa. Like it's an extreme level of creativity where he's like everything he does. I mean, if Frank Zappa was a singer, and it just reminds me of like that's where this would go. This it makes me think. I've been reading Anders Ericsson's book Peak. I was discussing this with Eric a little bit, and this is a very public facing book, but he spells out his classic theory on like deliberate practice versus naive practice, and really there's gradients in between, but the essential difference is that naive practice, you're just kind of showing up and going through the motions, and you think that just repetition will make you better. But with deliberate practice, you're actually working on new content and challenging
Yeah.
yourself in very incremental ways. And this is what
Yeah.
I think happens with improv is people think with improv like, oh, I just make stuff up, and if I just make stuff up long enough, I'll get
Yeah.
better.
No,
But that's not really what happens. You need content to
you
learn.
need to practice your basic 2-5-1 patterns and add extra tones and play them over progressions, but just play them over patterns and develop that. And that peak book is something that I think is a common thread with what Molly does. Like just pick Dr. Gebrian. It goes hand in hand with the neuroscience. You've got to
It
pick the
does.
difficult
Yeah.
stuff to work on to prepare, and you can't be mindless about how you practice about it, and you can't be mindless about skipping any of these levels in this harmonic learning sequence piece that goes beyond the recognition, identification of functions and progressions. That in order to get kids from that into improvisation, where they're playing unique melodies, starting with, what we talked about, adding rhythms to the bass line, up to singing just tonal patterns over the melody or as a melody, and then adding extra tones to the melody or adding extra tones to the tonal patterns, so that you're starting to create a melody. But then, so you've got creating your own melody and then using the melody and adding stuff to it, and then also adding extra tones to the functions. Those things can all be interwoven as you progress through this. And of course, you're adding content that's in other tonalities or adding a function. So instead of do, 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 so, do, it's so easy for me to tell kids, so now I'm going to take so, do, and now I'm going to do something different. I just want you to listen to it. Do, 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 re, so, do. Listen again. Do, 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 re, so, do. So instead of so, do, now I have re, so, do. And I just play it vanilla. And then I add the sevenths. And I might add a major 9 to the dominant. Simple things. Bum, bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum. Was that with extra tones or no extra tones? Listen to this one. Extra tones or no extra tones? Da, 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 da. Oh, that's, they don't even, I don't even want to hear that one anymore. Like I got that one's down. So how about extra tones like this? And then they re, so, do, re, so, do, and they change the extra tones to it just a little bit, just like, but I just don't, all I care about is that you're hearing an audiating re, so, do. So everybody's just saying do, 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 re, so, do. And it's like, why are you making us do this so much? It's easy. And then I'll change re, so, do to re, ra, do. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. That's not re, so, do. But they've got the harmonic rhythm. Bum, 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 ba-dum. And now they've just changed so to, re, ra, do. And they, I can recognize,
do
and then
re,
tell
big
me
re,
which one.
little re.
Sing the melody while I play the functions. And you tell me what functions I played. Did I do re, so, do? Or did I do re, ra, do? Or did I just do so, do? But they have to be audiating my functions while they're singing the melody. So now I'm forcing them to do both at the same time. And that's
the example
another piece that
you're
I
giving
didn't put
here.
in there. I need to write it down so it's more clear and
Sure.
more straightforward, the progression of what this harmonic learning series version 2.0 now, or whatever we want to call it.
The thing that I don't feel like a lot of people absorb when they hear you describe something like that is how incremental this is. Because a lot of people, and I'm dealing with this with a close friend of mine who's learning some jazz stuff, and he's already a monster audiator. He just doesn't know this jazz content, but he can really audiate well. Like he can audiate so many functions. He's got great tonal aptitude and achievement already. But there's a disconnect when he's thinking, or when I think a lot of MLT teachers are thinking, okay, I have all this new content to work on. I want to work on my tonal skills. There's not an acknowledgement of how micro this is done in. It's like, okay, we're going to start with, can you discriminate between the 5 chord being played here or 2-5-1 or so in the bass versus re so? That's it. That's level 1. That's going to take 30 seconds to 2 minutes max, and we're going to play around with these sounds, and we're out. We do something else. This isn't like a belabored half an hour thing. Like, this is fast. This stuff is fast in the lessons. It's like 30 seconds here, a minute there.
Yeah.
You know, now we're doing big re and little re. Yeah. Now we're doing re raw, and it's fast.
It completely trashes learning sequence activities. Needs to be the first 10 minutes of class. It just doesn't make any sense to do any part of your lesson that doesn't include audiation training. And some of it's listening, some of it's new content, some of it's just movement, some of it's just, you know, and it's not like intense pattern development. And it's certainly not, I don't have time for easy, medium, difficult patterns. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm really questioning about the validity of what Gordon would always say. Well, this is what I've learned from the research and my experience, that 10 minutes. And he's right, except I'm not getting work done fast enough. You know, and he's right, like, according to, you know, his research, and I don't have anything to disprove it. I just point to what my students know, and then show me your kids, and then I'll change my ideas. Show me when your kids can get beyond this. It's like that's the proof is in the pudding.
That's honestly my position with licks. Is like everyone has something to say about licks, and everyone's like, licks are good, licks are bad, whatever. Okay, try teaching a bunch of high school jazz students who can't improvise now, and you want to get them to improvise over the next couple of years, and you run the experiment. Teach some of them 30, 40 licks.
In addition to tonal patterns and harmonic. In addition to it's an and conversation. It's an and conversation. It's not like...
Very much so. But it'll blow your mind how much better licks are. And so until someone shows me the better curriculum, I'm just running that, you know?
Yeah. So there's one more point I want to make, is that over the summer, I didn't teach these kids. And they came back. The retention, and I think that's all theory of instruction.
Well, there's two things that Engelman talks about that you just mentioned.
That I just made more sure last year that what I taught stuck. And I didn't think I came close, but the retention was unbelievable compared to other years, that they came in and they already recognized and identified almost every tonality on day one or within a couple weeks. And that's what
happens when things are sequenced well. There's basically no forgetting over the summer.
And the thing
he talks about that.
And the thing that's gonna matter to me more even this year is I'm recording all of my lessons. And I'm listening for what the kids can do and can't do, or how I speak something and don't when I listen to. And I've recorded almost all of the first 4 lessons, except for like the dancing and the stuff. And I've done enough of that. I just don't know how I can.
If we go back to Anders Ericsson in this book, Peak, on deliberate practice, getting better at skills, which I would include teaching as that, you know, we're not just getting better as musicians. We have to get better at teaching these skills. If you have no way of getting feedback on your teaching, it's very unlikely you're actually improving as a teacher. And so as long as you have permission and it's ethically fine, if you can record the lessons and listen back, you can really feel like, wow, like I felt like I was delivering this lesson and they were getting it, but they were just staring at me. Or, you know, and I think for music, a lot of times audio recording is more than enough, right? But it can just give you some perspective on what's even going on. You might think you're doing tonal patterns for 2 minutes each class, and then you listen, and it's like taking up half your class. And then you're wondering why they don't like the lessons, because 15 minutes of the 30 are you trying to sing to a guitar student who doesn't want to sing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, I think that's another good point, is that the other thing that reminded me of Engelman is when Engelman talks about inductive learning, which is kind of like our LSAs, where we're saying, you know, this is sing this and repeat this, or is this the same as this, as we do in partial synthesis. He says that should only take a minute, right? And I think if you look at the attention span of your students, most students don't want to sing tonal patterns for more than, I would say, a couple minutes. Like, you need someone particularly motivated or interested who's going to want to sing tonal patterns.
Yeah.
For 10
Well,
minutes.
I give it to them for homework, and then I CC'd you on one of the homework assignments because I wanted
by accident,
because I wanted you to see my directions.
Yeah.
No,
that's great. I mean, you have to be
for
that
3 days, right, in a row. You do it twice a day for 2 minutes with an hour in between. If you do it right before bed, and if you do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, twice Monday with an hour in between, twice Tuesday, twice, right? And it's always duple, triple, right? The next, it's right now it's just meter on a week and tonality on another week. And then after 3 days, no practice Thursday and Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and the parents are buying into it.
No, it's great.
Which is phenomenal. Like, that I can get them to do it twice. And
this is what makes me feel like I should go get a teaching certificate, so I can actually just be not a band teacher, but just a primary school teacher, and I can just do half an hour of this every single day with the same students. Like, I feel like you get more.
Oh my God! If you did,
teacher.
Oh my God! If just 10 minutes, 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Is gargantuanly better than an hour once a week.
Oh yeah.
Double the time, but halve the time and spread it out over 3 days.
I mean, that's just the rule of thumb in general. Just spread your practice out. It's such a good idea.
Yeah.
For people that are busy too, I've mentioned this to some teachers I've worked with, and also just people that are very good audiators but are trying to get into jazz. Use your commuting time and your walking time to listen to things and sing
for your own development.
Driving or walking, make sets of tonal patterns. It's so beneficial to have.
Or buy mine.
Or
for sale. In the back of my book, I don't harp about this, but I have the extended functions in my book of So you've got the triple dominant and the.
But the reason I wanted to mention this is it's so useful to sing the same patterns over and over again, because they really get locked into your vocabulary and you start predicting them. If you just randomly sit at the piano and try to invent patterns and sing them back, it doesn't meld into your mind the same way. You need these things committed to your long-term memory, and so sing the same pattern sets.
Yeah, and then it'll transfer into symbolic association as well, much easier.
There was this cool lick I've been playing. I'll share this with you as we wrap up.
We got it. I got it.
Cool example of how this generalization stuff happens. I was playing this, so if we're in F. I was playing this lick. And I was working on that lick a lot. It goes over the 5 of 2. And then all of a sudden this came out. And so I never practiced that lick going over 5 to 1 in major. I kept doing it over 5 of 2, and I was getting very comfortable with that. And a couple days later, I'm just taking a solo on a random tune, and that comes out in a different context. But the brain just was like, oh, it's kind of like this, just generalize it. And what's so cool is there's zero intellectual thinking. Yeah. I had to figure out what I did after I did it. And if that's happening, some good stuff.
See, that's the generalization. That's just generalization is you don't need to be taught. You give the kids the powers and then get the hell out of their way. And that's what I'm trying to get to. And I'm trying to give them as much power as I can by giving them, solid roots, you know,
No, exactly.
like tree
And I bring that up
roots.
because the point of licks is not for you to play the exact lick in the solo. It's to give your mind fodder to generalize with.
Yep.
That's the
Yep.
actual point
Yep.
of licks. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. It keeps going.
So you should be stealing like a pirate. I mean, you should have a stack of either use a voice recording app or have a stack of manuscript paper. Every time there's a cool lick, put that thing down and learn to sing it.
Yeah.
Walk around town singing it, and I mean, you need Lego blocks to play with, basically, right?
Yeah.
And these are the patterns.
Oh, and I got one other thing, and then we'll sign off for sure.
Sure.
Samara Joy came out with her new album. I'm in love with this girl. Portrait. Her new album is out, and everybody just listen to this lady sing. This is a 24-year-old, 25 maybe now. She's just so old school. Go get that. I'll put a link in that, and a link for Peak, and a link for what else did we talk about today? I'll put it in the show notes, and we'll catch it.
Oh, it's so crazy how well the Gordon stuff, like Gordon and Anders Ericsson and Engelman, they all are talking about the same stuff.
Yeah, and Molly,
like Gordon's
and they put
music
Molly in there
specific.
in terms of like the practices of practicing, like the like how to set your system up so that you can do the kind of practicing, to get the results, and then the content, and then the sequence of that content.
Yeah.
The content's kind of subjective. You get to pick whether you want to go jazz way or whether you want to, get into, Chopin, Polonaises and all the crazy great harmonies. And
He's doing the same thing. A lot of that stuff is, instead of, it'll be like 2/5s to other, centers, or it'd be like 4/5s. Like, if you understand this jazz stuff harmonically, it might not be your style.
Where did that come from, though? The jazz didn't pop out of anywhere. It didn't, right?
No, it came from Bach and Chopin and Mozart, and it's all the same stuff. One thing I really learned from Molly, even after I had all this Gordon stuff down and all this other crazy stuff, was that just actually planning my practice sessions was profoundly valuable. And I'm not saying you have to schedule your practice session minute by minute, but have a monthly plan. Like, what are you trying to tonally work on this month, or rhythmically?
That's for the musicians out there. The teachers, just get on some root melodies and mess with them. Get the kids,
for sure.
Push the kids toward the improvisation creativity, because that'll so many more benefits when you're doing. If you can improvise before you read, oh my God.
Mm-hmm. That was so I'm like the poster boy for this. I could improvise very well as soon as I got a saxophone. I wasn't playing intelligently over chord, like fast changes, but as soon as I had a sax in my hand,
you can skip symbolic association completely. I don't.
Oh yeah.
I mean, forever, but I don't recommend that, because you use so much more vocabulary you can gather from reading content off of notation that maybe you don't even audiate, but at least, right, you can get your ear spiced up. But the chances that you're going to be able to read melody in two parts at the same time and all this kind of stuff right off the bat will be, improved by the ability to be creative and improvise.
And even what, we had, I don't know if this is going to come out before the episode with Eric Bluestein, but Bluestein, he was really standing up for composition, because we often talk about improv being, so important, but composition is important too. But
it's prerequisite. It's a prerequisite.
Yeah. I mean, if you can improvise well, you're going to have a much better time composing.
Yeah. Well, that episode will be coming out soon.
Yeah. So.
But this one, this one will go right out probably. So, might have to listen to these episodes more than once.
I would recommend it.
There's a couple of them. There's a couple of them. I went back. And it tends to be the ones I don't talk very much.
I still listen to episodes, and I find it useful. But happy to chat with anyone. If anyone has any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to do a Zoom session with someone. It's always fun to chat.
Yep. All right, thanks, Beau. This is good.
All right, thanks, Eric.